he really wants to bring in Christ, but he illustrates the power of God by illustrating how bad it is in the first. And so I think that makes a description of it. So verse 5 it says, "For every battle of warfare is with confused noise and garments rolled in blood." So thus far, from verse 3, it refers to the Assyrians who bring a bloody onslaught against the land of Galilee. But what follows in the latter affliction in the same area wrought with fire, which is in contrast with that of the Assyrians as introduced in chapter 8 verse 21 through chapter 9 verse 2. Now you ask me why Isaiah did that. It's an interesting thought. So why would he bring in and tell Israel that they are going to get wiped out? Nothing you can do about it. Just get ready. You're going to get wiped out. You're going to get slaughtered. You're going to be annihilated, and that's it. The second affliction, which Matthew says is a fulfillment of the ministry of Christ, the switch from the Assyrian anguish to the Messiah and back again also illustrates here is a very pronounced and abrupt way. From what he said first, he just erupts, hits the second thought, "For unto you a child is born." So in verse 6 says what? What's the first phrase? Is it verse 6 that we want? Richard?
Unto us a child is born.
Wait a minute, just stop there. Okay. So here we have this affliction. All of a sudden he says, "For unto you a child is born." Now where'd that come from? Here we're talking about the Assyrian army coming in and destroying Israel, annihilating Israel. And the army's coming in like Gideon did to Midian. And the verse stops. And next thing we hear is, it says, "For unto us a child is born." Okay? This is a word that is supplied by the King James translators, which suggests they understood the contrast is called for by the use of the verb that this is attached to. So then the figure of fire as a picture of messianic motivation is mentioned here and also in chapter 4 verse 4. Shall be. This shall be. The subject of the verb has not been stated. Thus the King James translators provided the word "this" to refer ahead to the kind of a spiritual battle the Messiah will bring, which is in contrast here. The battle and warfare in the first idea, in the first part of the verse, are both masculine and cannot be the subject, so the feminine verb requires this to show that a different sort of battle will be introduced by the Son of Righteousness. See, you have to know Greek, and you have to know Hebrew to understand it. If you didn't know Hebrew, he's going to college. In other words, is Jesus going to come and literally, physically destroy Israel again when he comes? Now, see, first of all, Isaiah is saying that the Assyrians are going to come and literally wipe out physically Israel. The second affliction, how are you going to know that that's not what Jesus is going to do when he comes? So, it's in how the text is written. This, as in contrast, one is destruction of people. There is a different kind of affliction that Jesus Christ is going to show on Israel that is in contrast to what Isaiah said was going to happen to Israel in 722 BC. Battle and warfare is in the first contrast, and then he shows that a different sort of battle will be introduced by the Son of Righteousness. So we have to understand that as this wind. But fire is what characterizes the child to be born, whose description gives further information about the Emmanuel. Notice in verse 6, for to us a child is born, to us a son is given, and the government shall be upon his shoulder, and his name shall be called Wonderful Counselor, the Mighty God, the Everlasting Father, and the Prince of Peace. And we have preached 15 sermons on that verse. Because all we talk about here is that that a son is given, and the government shall be upon his shoulder, and his name shall be called Wonderful Counselor, the Mighty God, the Everlasting Father, and the Prince of Peace. Now you're scratching your head and you're saying, how did that get in this conversation? You know, you can be talking with a conversation and on one topic, and all of a sudden you can switch and be talking about something totally different. So, the word, in verse 6, for, the Hebrew word for, meaning because. The word for in the Hebrew could be translated because that are for, which begins this verse requires it is to be linked to the preceding clause. Like any because introduces the explanation of that which goes before. This one also is linked to the burning and fire fuel in the previous verse. Of the increase of his government and peace, verse 7, there shall be no end upon the throne of David and upon his kingdom, to order it and to establish it with judgment and with justice, for henceforth, ever forever, the zeal of the Lord of hosts will perform this. Now it stops. It stops as fast as it started. It's like somebody got to be daydreaming and threw in verse 6 and verse 7, that you don't understand why it's in verse 6 and 7, because it does not seem to have anything to do with the first 5 verses. Then we come to the rest of the chapter, and it reverts back to the Assyrian assault. Oh, just by the way, I want to throw in verse 6 and 7. The Lord sent a word to Jacob, and it has lighted upon Isaiah. Verse 9. All the people shall know, even Ephraim and the inhabitants of Samaria, they say it in the pride and stoutness of heart. Send a word. It means debtor. It means pestilence. So the second half of verse 1 and all of verse 2 refers to the Messianic visit. The Assyrian attack on Israel is then spoken of again in verse 3 and verse 5. And then it moves back to the Messianic visit to describe verse 5 through verse 7. And so the rest of the chapter, verse 8 through chapter 10, verse 34, speaks of the Assyrians and the earthly punishment related to the rise and the fall of the Assyrian army. Ephraim, verse 9, Ephraim and the inhabitants of Samaria. This is an historical note that makes it plain that the people he speaks to is the northern kingdom, and it is still before their captivity by the Assyrians, since Ephraim did not inhabit Syria after 722 BC and ever before. So this is again a prophetic thought that he's bringing out. The bricks are fallen down, verse 10, the bricks are fallen down, but we will build with hewn stones. The sycamore trees are cut down, but we will change them into cedar. So as you can see, that the chapter then goes into, and it again relates to that God is going to bring about immediately the destruction of the Assyrians for the punishment of not believing in God. So the tribes, so in verse 10, we have only lost a few bricks. The tribes east of the Jordan had already been taken captive when these words were penned, and that was followed shortly by the devastation of Galilee, which left the tribe of Ephraim, Ascar, and the half-tribe of Manasseh, and Asher in Mount Ephraim, and the capital of Samaria. The loss was bricks compared to hew stones. Isaiah was using language that they understood and compared this verse with the loss of some of the tribes while they remain intact in some other tribes. So, there's always a comparison as to what was happening, what will happen, and what can happen later. You think the worst is yet to come. It's happened, but the worst yet is to come. And as we see in America, what is coming in the past has been bad, but what is going to come is worse yet. We haven't seen anything yet. America is I mean, I guess we need to say God bless America, but can God bless America? I mean, it's constantly getting worse and getting worse and it's getting worse, and they're beginning to realize that. I'll close with this. We're not getting better, and it's understandable that science is beginning to see that we're bad anyway. You remember I was always telling you that when babies get bad early in life, they start showing signs of evil when they're 3 years old. And did you know it even starts earlier than that? They had discussed. The latest reversion is that they had a study to show if babies, before they can talk, can show anger. And not only can show anger, but they can show dislike. And I think the illustration was they had a baby that was given a cookie and beans, and the baby one baby liked cookies, the other baby liked beans, but what they discovered was that the baby that liked beans did not like the baby who liked beans. In other words, the baby that liked cookies resented the baby that liked beans, so they could distinguish cognitively who they like and who they don't like based upon their preference. Which indicates in my working on my master's in child development that I didn't fully complete, is that from a very early age in the development of children, they are developing their dislikes and their likes, and they've learned to express it even before they can talk. And that's called the Adamic nature. It's in an individual believer at a very early age, and so that's the reason that when you have children, you need to start with them when they are tiny babies, helping them grow into that relationship, because we think it's funny. We think what they're doing is funny, but they're developing an attitude, who they're going to like and who they don't like. And they're going to resent the other child who is not, that doesn't like the same thing they like, so that their friendship is different. Anyway, the point being is that our nature needs to be dealt with when we're very young. And Bob expressed it well. One girl said, my baby is perfect. And he says, oh, no, they're not. I know their mom and dad. And they know grandpa and grandma. So the point is, God does deal with nations that do not obey Him. And I don't think America is doing a very good job. I want Christians to change the culture, not the world to change the culture. We need to do that. Richard, will you lead us in our closing prayer, please?
Father, thank you for the message we've heard this evening in Isaiah again. May we apply what we hear in this word, be grateful and thankful for all the teaching we have, and help us to apply it to our lives and make changes and learn from history and events of the previous events. Just going to pray now for this and the service, and get us home safely, and ask us now in Jesus' name I pray.
As a way of announcement, our revival with Brother Winston Hall will be the 24th through the 27th of April, and then this coming Sunday, Brother Bob will be speaking at 11 o'clock, and so bring some guests, and we'll have a good time Sunday. Any prayer requests before we leave, as we take up in a special offering tonight?
Yeah, remember Jason.
Remember Jason,
My son.
her son, our son. Okay?
And remember Dorothy, they're still praying about my insurance.
Lord, do something with that insurance. I'm tired of hearing about it. Okay, I'm
I am
kidding.
too. I'm hoping to get it satisfied tomorrow.
Did you get that puzzle together?
My kids tell me not to worry about it, but let them worry about it.
Here, I've got some here.